that the same case for you, and how do you really know that students are learning the material?
Yep, absolutely. So we have, in California, we have the whole end of the year assessment, and we're transitioning, just like most states, into the whole Common Core thing and doing the smarter balance, all that kind of stuff. So we're playing in the same, kind of on the same field. And so to me, my thought on tests has always been confrontational. And my belief on the standardized test has always been, and this was, I think, the exact line in the book. I said, at some point in your career, you decide if you teach more to kids or you teach more to tests. I decided a long time ago, I teach kids. And it's not that I don't care about the test. It's that I think that by focusing on powerful instruction first, that the tests take care of themselves. So it always comes back to engagement. And that, like, it doesn't matter what you say in your classroom if nobody's listening. And so it always comes back to engagement first, and it always comes back to powerful instruction. And that when you can create that environment where you have buy-in from the kids, and the kids, for me, now I teach a tough population. My kids couldn't care less about the test, and not because of like any sort of philosophical reasons like me. They couldn't care less about the test because they couldn't care less about a lot of stuff. And so for me, the most important thing is to get the buy-in, to get them to try. And if they try, then I know they're going to be fine because they've had a year of hopefully powerful instruction and engagement. And so I always focus there first. But as far as assessment, I give some very standard tests throughout the course of my year to kind of get a gauge of whether or not they're picking up the material. I'm also more and more looking into the ideas. I'm a huge fan of Rick Warmelli. And so Rick Warmelli is kind of one of the leading voices in the standard-based grading movement. And so I love a lot of his thoughts on that. And like, for example, one of the things that he says that I think is powerful is one of the arguments that a lot of teachers give for like not letting students redo stuff is they say, well, no, this is about like getting them ready for life. Where in life do you get to just redo stuff? And his point is, well, like everywhere in life. Right? So if you fail your driver's test, what do? You retake it. If you fail the bar when you want to be a lawyer, you take it. Most lawyers take it 2, 3, 4 times before they pass that thing, right? And if you want to be a doctor, at the highest professions, right? If you want to be a doctor, you fail, you take it again, right? And so why in 9th grade can't they retake the geography test if the doctor can retake his test? So,
right.
But I think that a lot of people get. I never let the test drive my instruction. So I decide what I want students to learn, and I teach it in the most powerful way I can, and then I know that they're going to do just fine on that test.
How do you know more so in your classroom? So like you've done a unit in your classroom, how are you assessing them? Are they doing projects, or is it a variety of things, or is it pretty much a standard, written test?
Yeah, no, so I would say it's a whole wide variety of things. And so I'm trying to get as many kind of, I hate to use the word data points, but like as many data points as I possibly can. So I have some summative assessments, some formative assessments. I have reflections. So, for example, homework for me doesn't look like traditional homework at all. When they have it, it's always more reflection. I never say read chapter 43, do the questions at the end, and be ready to talk about this tomorrow, right? Because I don't know what's going to happen. I never put my lesson at the jeopardy of having them having done something before they get to me, right? So, because I've seen too many lessons blow up because of that, right? So if you are putting your lesson at jeopardy of failure, if a student doesn't do something the night before, the population I teach, that's not good, right? And so, but what I do is I have them write reflections, and then I want them to take what we learned and personalize it and reflect upon it and think about how it fits in with maybe their life or their experience. Just a real quick example, a very typical reflection for me. Let's say that we're doing the Revolutionary War, and we're talking about the day that the farmers, merchants, the Minutemen stood on the green in front of the British Army in Lexington. Well, a reflection for me would be, so would you have been willing to sit or stand on the green that morning? And by the way, are there some things in life worth dying for? Because they were willing to die for that. They stood out in front of that. But what would some of those things be that you would be willing to die for? And so now I have these tough students who don't seem to care about anything, right? And they're writing me these reflections where they say, well, you know what? I would actually be willing to die for my little sister, or for my mom or my dad. I would lay my life down. And it's like almost shocking to see, like, whoa, this is a kid that just sits there with a chip on their shoulder and appears to be so cold-hearted, right? But now, by making them personalize the material, it kind of like brings them out of their shell. So I kind of like answered that in about 7 different ways, and probably none of them very.
No, awesome, thank you.
So, Dave, I'm Ronnie Chris Savage, and I teach business, personal finance, and math. So we talked a little bit before about the demographics of your, like, who you do teach, and it sounds like, you know, you do have kids that you're teaching that really have a lot of challenges. Can you talk a little bit about, like, who your kids are?
Yeah, for sure. So my students come from 3 groups for the majority of my day. You know, like when the students stand up at the end of the year and give the graduation speeches, I don't recognize any of those kids. Those are not my people. My people come from 3 groups for the majority of my day. Group 1 are special education students who are being mainstreamed into my classroom as their least restrictive environment. I teach every junior special education student on my campus. U.S. History have no separate pull-out classes, which is the only course on campus like that, by the way. And then Group 2 are students who are so individually disruptive in their college prep classroom that they've been removed for the sake of the learning environment of the other students in that class. And then in the wisdom of what we do at West Hills, we take all those students who have been individually disruptive and we say, why don't we group them all together into one room?
Genius.
Because that would be educationally sound, right?
Wow.
And then the 3rd group of students are downright openly apathetic. They're not necessarily a behavior problem. They're just not doing anything. And so they're taken out of their primary course and they're brought down to see me in SS9. And so if you take those 3 groups of students, those are those are my people.
Wow.
Those are the students that I love to teach. Those are the students I specialize in teaching.
Right.
And those are the students that Teach Like a Pirate was specially designed for, kind of working on the front lines of classes like that, where you walk in and you're up against it right away. That, you know, it's not that they don't care about U.S. history. They don't even want to be at school.
Yeah. And our school, we don't track, so we don't have the college prep, you know, kids.
Yeah.
We don't have the honors kids. They're all mixed together. But I
well,
love.
Good for you.
Yeah. I love the fact that you talked about engagement not having to be 100%, and that, you know, like in a class, you know, like you never know what you're going to get, and I'm sure your lessons change every year based on your kids in some way, shape, or form. And so when you're trying a lesson, or when you're teaching a subject that you've taught before, but you know, like, you know your kids, and so you change it a little bit. What does that look like when you see, like, you know, like you've got maybe 10% or 20% of the kids? Like, how do you work that room when you're
right? So, because this is something that happens to me all the time, especially with new teachers. I've noticed that new teachers really beat themselves up, and then when I actually sit down and talk to them and say, okay, so what happened? And I'll find out that their lesson was awesome. And they were upset because there was like one kid in the corner who was like having trouble focusing that day. Yeah. I'm just like, you know, if you've set up a situation where you think that success for you is that you're going to have 100% engagement 100% of the time in your classroom, then you have set up a situation where you're going to have a career filled with disappointment. Because none of us have that all the time, right? It's not about any certain level of perfection. It's about getting better. So I think that I have classes that are more engaged than I used to before I started to kind of formalize and use all these techniques and strategies. And I'm trying to continue to get better and better and better and draw more people in. But if one kid, now this is a quote. I think it's Jack Rosenblum said this, and it's a fantastic quote. Jack Rosenblum said, if one person tells you you're a horse, they're crazy. If 2 people tell you they're a horse, or tell you that you're a horse, there's a conspiracy afoot. But if 10 people tell you you're a horse, it's time to buy a saddle. And so that's the way that I look at lessons. If there's one kid who's disengaged, looking out the window, you know what? Maybe there's just something going on with that kid that day, right? If a couple kids are disengaged, my radar's up now. If I have a whole group of students who are not engaged by the see that as, rather than a failure and personalizing and beating myself up about it, I have to see it as the feedback that I need to get better. And so turning those failures into feedback, and instead of getting all upset and beating ourselves up or beating the kids up, just saying, hey, you know what? I need to make some tweaks, some twists, some turns into this, and to try to get back on track here.
So one other thing we talked about was your colleagues. Oops. There we go. We talked about your colleagues and what this is like for them, and how do you deal with, you know, like if you have one teacher that the kids really love to be in their classroom and the other teachers not so much, and how you collaborate with your colleagues, or you know what kind of support they give you, or what that environment is like.
Yeah. So I feel very fortunate in that my department at my school is, I think it's amazing. And we are very much not the same, but we have very much have great strengths. And so I feel very fortunate that I don't have, you know, if I felt like I was like just some super rock star down in one room and everybody else was like just horrific, and kids, you know, I had like 1,000 kids outside my door trying to beat their way in, then it might be a problem. But I really do think that we have a great group of teachers that they're going to be okay no matter where they are. Now, certainly, I get maybe the lion's share of the attention, right? And but my colleagues have handled that really well. And I think an important thing I think about working with colleagues in collaboration is that section of the book towards the end. It says collaboration versus collaboration. And that's for some people, that's one of the more controversial parts of the book, but for me, it's something that's one of the most important parts of the book. And that I've been to so many schools where their concept of collaboration is twisted, and it's just all about everybody doing everything exactly the same. And that's not what like a PLC is about. That's not what any sort of collaborative team is about, right? It's not about standardizing education. It's about improving it. And so when we work together as a department or as a subject area,